Hello, and welcome back to another episode of High Leverage Actions. This week we are talking about healing, and this is the podcast where we talk about small changes that you can make that have a significant impact in your personal development to find your higher self. So, my name is Kay Reeve. I'm an emotional awareness expert. I help parents find the mentoring skills to support teenagers with neurodivergent and suicidal depression. And this is Rory. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name's Rory. Thanks for that intro, Kay. And we're here to crowbar a better life and a better world through through high leverage actions, like you say. Um, I'm a neurodiversity and creative flow coach. I love to help heart-centered, empathic, caring creatives create the health and the wealth and the career development and the relationships that they really want in their life, beating that procrastination and perfectionism that society and institutions sort of feed to us through media and all of that sort of stuff, and turning those ideas into real actionable visionary projects.
Amazing. And so, yes, a massive part of this topic tonight is what you do with holistic health approaches in so many ways. And we were just saying before we came on, Rory could talk about this for a year. And like he literally can. He has a year-long mentoring program about this. So let's kick off tonight with what we're going to call an overview, because we can't give you a year's worth of healing information in 1 hour. So all right, I think tonight I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, Rory.
Okay. Um, well, um, just having a well, could I
Question
ask could I ask you what healing means to you?
to me, fantastic. Oh, as an emotional awareness expert, for me, I have a massive focus on emotional healing. But I've also been through a lot of health challenges that have required healing. There's been trauma, um, physical injuries over the years. And then there's also been things like relationship healing as well, actually mending things between two people when things become tense and overwhelmed. So for me, healing actually covers a lot of things, as well as sometimes it's not about being unwell or stuck or ill or injured, but actually just finding that day-to-day healing to avoid burnout and actually maintaining emotional, physical, mental health. So for me, healing is the process of moving any aspect of health in a positive direction to avoid negative consequences or to heal from them. Mm.
Lovely. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I like the way you bring in the emotions. It's a real core element to managing healing, which is only just really being recognized in the medical systems of like what they would call endocrino immuno uh, uh,
Wow.
um, integration. So basically it's
That for me.
hormones and you know, uh, the the, yeah, the
Mm.
really around how the neurology and the mind and the emotions all affect our healing physically, but also how we even like how the mind will really, if we're not managing that, then we're not necessarily managing our habits. And then if we're not managing our habits, then it doesn't matter how much we know about healing, it won't necessarily move into getting things done. So even that's just what, a topic in itself around habit management to help with healing. But coming back to healing itself, healing comes from the word, comes the health has the word heal in it, and healing is how to manage or managing health. So therefore, um, the the what is health in a lot of ways, and health is like you say, managing for finding balance, or that the body's innate way in which it wants to find a balance. And when there's like a swing in one direction or another, towards either what perceived as negative or ill health or disruptive healing processes or dysfunction. In the physical sense, it can be broken down into physical, like, oh, there's the paper cut. Oh, I notice a paper cut. And then after, 6 weeks, then it heals over. And it's like, that's our typical, normal, very obvious way in which we can notice what healing is doing, what the body and the is doing, and how that could be taken for granted sometimes when it's just something minor. Is really fascinating. Um, and what actually is health is how we perceive how we function in the world. So if there's something that we can't necessarily or don't believe we can do physically, that is going to be how we perceive our health. And in current terms, like you say about talking about emotional healing, how we hear people talk about their state of their health is through how they feel, which is not in the typical definition of health in itself. So when you look up the word health, it's about how we gauge performance and function, um, which is kind of where we want to actually focus on and not focus on how we feel, because if we just go on how we feel, we can get caught up in pain equals danger equals dysfunction equals something broken, which equals then potentially avoiding doing things, which could potentially mean more of a same cycle going through as a kind of physical feeling. Yeah, because the pain perception runs through our emotional centers. So so that's where again it comes back to looking at the emotion is so important, and how to be aware of what it is we're feeling, but also not regard it as truth in itself. Um, so that's the physical piece around it, the healing. There's also now looking at potentially how um, healing the the mind is just kind of coming about through the pandemic, and how everyone had to really focus on managing their um, psychology throughout that time, mind management, not just psychotherapy and counseling to manage the mind, but also people started to look much more holistically. And I think a lot of people now are well aware of the spectrum of mental health, and it not just be weird to be having a problem with mental health and it suddenly being, going from one thing to another, and or you're born with it or something like that. People are now so much more aware of how stress may lead to overwhelm, or lead to even the perception of what we believe is, if we again coming to making ourselves wrong with confetti, but if we make ourselves wrong about whatever state we're in, that's going to lead potentially to building on the stress, the overwhelm, the which can actually slow down healing processes over a prolonged period of time. It can, and where relaxation, rest, and deeper sleeping promotes a um a regeneration of the cells more easily.
Wow.
So even just on that perspective, we just talked about the mental, we just talked about the physical, we talked about the emotional um part of healing, and what we feel and what we perceive we can and can't do, and whether we feel like we're making ourselves wrong or right about something, will be all affecting the healing processes both physically through the stress chemicals, and also mentally through whether we perceive something is a problem in our minds too.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot to unpack there, Rory. And no, it really does highlight how just the word health on its own is such a phenomenal topic. And that's without including things like financial health and world health, you know, the health of our planet Earth, environmental health and stuff like that, and nutritional. And there's just so many ways in which we can incorporate the term health and concepts of health. I liked what you were saying about early on the endocrine system and the hormones that our body secretes. And that is why when we have these emotions, we've got the happy, sad, angry, and depressed. And the happiness is the dopamine and I can never remember, oxytocin, serotonin, all the happy hormones. And it took me, I think, years to realize actually these were hormonal reactions going on in our body. I knew about adrenaline. You know, most people grow up knowing about adrenaline, but I hadn't learned about all of the others until I was probably in my late 30s, early 40s. And then I start thinking, hang on, there's even more chemistry going around the body here. But having been in St. John Ambulance and dealing with first aid, I was used to dealing with adrenaline when we dealt with difficult situations. And one of the things they used to talk to us about was when you have dealt with a difficult situation, how do you manage your adrenaline? How do you manage that PTSD like emotions after an event? And so we used to talk about that in terms of stress and anger management. And I did used to find that if I'd been at a difficult scenario with an accident or somebody really, you know, on death's doorstep, that I could have kickbacks from that for up to 2 days. And sometimes it's recognizing patterns in this health as well. But then going on, so we've got the adrenaline, the cortisol, the happy chemicals. But I find depression is more of a lack of those. So if you're or overwhelmed with the adrenaline and the cortisol, but you are lacking the serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, to me, that is where if you're missing these happy chemicals and overwhelmed with these two, you end up being dragged down. You physically and mentally feel that weight of that chemical shift within the body. And as you come out of that depression, you gradually feel that increase of them as well. And then on the other hand, there can be the extreme where you get too high, not chemically high, but like excitement. We can get overexcited, and children are naturally overexcitable. They're very relentless at being overexcited, and they can very quickly jump between them all as well. But then talking about health and the healing, I mean, I know from my own experience over the years as well, is very often we work on healing and we go to the doctors and we get medications, and sometimes we work on diet and we go and see specialists. Sometimes we hire health coaches, and I've been through all of this journey. But what do you do when you get to a point where nothing that you're doing seems to be helping? And I know a lot of people will just keep going back to the GP over and over and end up with more and more and more medications that very often making them more ill than the original symptoms. And I know I had this for 16 years where it wasn't so much taking more and more medications, but just trying different ones. And when nothing failed, you know, where do you turn when the GPs turn around and say, oh, it's just your mental health? And then they're actually giving a misdiagnosis crossed over from physical health to mental health because they can't find the answers. And this is where I found myself a couple of years ago, where I even failed a basic memory test and was being tested for heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's at the end of 2023. And I'd lost the ability to communicate. Now, for somebody with ADHD, as I was then discovering, for a GP or a referral service to message me back and say, oh, you don't need a diagnosis, chances are you can't communicate because of the ADHD. And I'm like, that is completely the wrong way around. So sometimes I think with health, the key message that's coming out of this is we also have to trust our own instincts a lot. And I knew there was something else going on when the GPs were telling me there wasn't, because what I had didn't fit with their testing routines. And I ended up having to go private and find a way to get my own results. It turned out that I had a lot of food allergies, a lot of. And once I changed my diet, I'm back. My health is back. My brain took a little while longer, and it is taken most of last year to really build up that communication again. But I'm back, and I'm proud of what I've done this last year to get there, to be able to go from not communicating or being able to finish a single sentence and not even knowing how to make a cup of coffee some days, through to being back here running a business, publish more books, mentored Rory. We've got the High Leverage Actions podcast going. But sometimes it is that instinct in there in health that is really, really important, and never giving up finding answers. Don't succumb to the fact that you're told you should live with something for life, or that it's not what you think. Trust what you think and keep searching. So on a bit of a rant there for you, Rory, but what would your advice be as well to people who are really finding that they've got longer term health issues and they're not getting solutions, whether it is chronic inflammation, autoimmune, something else undiagnosed? What would your advice be to people to get up and get going again?
Great question, Kay. So,
Yeah.
thank you for asking that. So there's two things I would like to bring up first of all. One is like you say that you can get caught up in this if you're just focus yeah, if you're speaking to one practitioner, doesn't matter who it is, you don't want to get too many opinions and have too many cross threads because you want to follow down a line of inquiry enough to make sure it's not something that's working or something that just takes time for the healing process. It's because there's a phase. It's like some people will have pain because they're going into a healing process because they're just starting to get pain. For instance, as an idea, pain has had so many reasons for it, but also you can have pain just for some reason you didn't have the pain in some of the healing processes and then getting pain on the way out of something. So it just is a little seems like a little flicker, a murmur. Because pain is only present when our subconscious, whether conscious or not, our subconscious knows or believes that there's a pattern of danger. So pain is another topic in itself compared to healing because it's often associated with pain being equal to structural issues or problems. And it's just simply not the case. And it's not to say it's all completely made up. We can't actually separate the physical from the perception of what's going on. So pain is only a signal. It's like traffic lights coming on. It's not actually whether because you can have traffic lights that break down, and it means the traffic goes everywhere confused. That's a really, I love that analogy because there can be traffic jams for the immune system not getting, or the blood not getting to a particular area, or too much inflammation being stored in a place that's not actually leaving. Um, and then pain is either appropriate or it's not. And so that's my point is like if it's not the same as like traffic light on, traffic stops, traffic starts. It's you have rush hours. It's a really great analogy again because if you've got a rush hour and the traffic lights go wonky or they're working, you can just see how they're because there's more emphasis and more stuff traveling at one particular time. It doesn't matter whether the traffic lights are doing their thing or not. It's you can tell when, or you can it not. How to put it? It's there's extra stuff going on regardless of the signals that are happening, and then sometimes it's free. So that's my point is to separate the ideas of our feelings and the actual thing that's happening is important because it works both ways.
Yeah.
Uh, it can be a benefit to separate those feelings, but it can also be a benefit to notice those feelings and work out what to do. Secondly, um, uh, not disregarding the medical system at all. In fact, it's really important that it's there. So I just want to make that also clear from my perspective is that if we have a broken leg or a car accident, it's a completely different scenario to having chronic fatigue or or an inflammatory disorder or something that is particularly long term health. So that's why I'm glad you asked me about the long term health. So short term management of healing is kind of well known. It's quite easy for them to observe it and see it and manage it and put a bandage on it and all that kind of stuff. So that's really great. It's just that they were applying the same approaches up until not that long ago, and they're starting to realize, that you get doctors that are prescribing it's what's called lifestyle medicine. Um, uh, and especially if you go more private, then you're going to get more specialist answers and results and ideas. So so the long-term part of healing is what healing's about, really, at the end of the day. How it's being managed and regulated over a longer period of time is important. And I've got a system called the Holistic Health Hygiene that I've put together, and there's probably many different private practitioners that have their own ways of looking at this, but often it's more a case of someone is really good at nutrition or someone's really good at um uh functional movement exercises and things like that. So I've got, but the system I put together, or the model, is to really look at an overview of it from a perspective of where to focus on first, and to see how that shifts. Because if you've got a lot of time and energy and focus spent in one area, but something's not shifting, or suddenly it's doesn't seem like it's working, then there could be something that's had less time focused on it, or not at all ever even thought about. So I'm just going to throw the patterns out there, and then we can um yeah, I could speak about a couple of other things before, because otherwise, yes, otherwise it will just go. It can go. We can talk about in any one of those patterns in depth as well. So the typical the typical most obvious four patterns that people can perceive or publicly perceive as something that they can do for their long-term health is moving, so physical exercise, and then there's eating, so knowing what chemicals are going into the system, or what nutrition is going into the system, or lack of nutrition is going into the system. Um, and that's again a mind, can be a minefield for people. Then we've got um sleeping habits. It's called sleep hygiene. So to look at how it's not just a case of, you know, a quick thing. There can be so many ways to set up better sleeping environments to help with the healing processes at night. Um, and then there's breathing, which is probably the most newest ideas around the most obvious four patterns. So
Wow.
breathwork being not just about, it's been known that it's to helps with anxieties and stress, because it's there to take ourselves back into the moment and use the breath, because we're either breathing automatically or we're breathing consciously. We can grab hold of it. The nerves that supply the breathing muscles are both automatic
Mm.
and also conscious. They have both wirings, um, which means it's the pretty much the only physical access point to the automated nervous system. So we can grab hold of our subconscious nervous system actively through that process, and that's the access point into our subconscious mind physically.
I hadn't thought about that before. Yeah. So when you think about even breathing, we breathe without thinking, but we can actually think about going, I'm going to take a breath in. So I never thought about the fact it's both conscious and unconscious. And yet that seems so obvious when you say it. But yes, and being able to do that breath work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's an example of what that may now be obvious. So you've got muscles which we are conscious of, and there's obviously subconscious posture that we're not thinking about. However, that's still um kind of conscious. Whereas the completely subconscious muscles are would be the muscles that push the food along our tract. So when we eat, they turn on and they squeeze the food round and down through the system. And so they're completely not in our conscious control. So that's the example there where the diaphragm breathing muscle is both. And that's why when we do it consciously, it actually engages our subconscious at the same time.
Yeah. I know there are people can do that with the heart rate as well, aren't there? Not everybody learns this skill. It's a little bit more difficult, but I've seen that where some people can literally lower their heart rate, like for cold water diving and things like that. And I know we watched a video about that the other day. But a guy named Win Hof or something, Wim Hof, I've seen him as well, where he really like hibernates the heart to go into cold water.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's fascinating how many ways we can control the body to start working on health. Thank you, Rory.
That's all right. Uh, so that's the breath, that's the breathing. That's just the nervous system regulation. Also, breath work helps with our metabolism and how we regulate energy through oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. So that's that whole thing too. And so basically, the breath does nervous system, it does uh, metabolism, and it does emotional stuff too. So so there's the breath that and again that's a whole section there. And then there's the four other patterns that I've seen that are more psychological patterns that are actually in our control to change things if we grab hold of them and work with them and change the muscles of them, um, the mental muscles. So we have thinking. So again, up until now, um, it's not been thought of that we have automatic thoughts that come along, but we can also say in our mind, or how we talk, what we're talking. Talking is thoughts in action. So therefore, when we declare things, when we say everything that we'd say is a direct either reflection on what we're thinking, or we can again consciously affect our subconscious by consciously speaking or thinking or writing that language. So that's all to do with language. Then feelings, it's all coming back to the emotive part, but feelings, hunger, thirst, pain, um, uh, tiredness, they're all of the sensations that we have are all signals that are physical sensations that regulate whether we need or perceived whether we need to look after ourselves in some way.
Mm.
So that in itself is another one that can become dysregulated or overturned, overcooked, or underregulated or not felt as much, which means that if we don't feel hungry at the right times, or we won't eat as much as we need to actually have in. So all of these feelings are there to make sure we are doing the actions that will maintain our healing processes. And so that again is another one. And then the last two is expression and connection. So expressing being again talking out loud, dancing or moving the body, art work, creative expression, uh, artworks, playing music, and all that kind of stuff. So that's expression. And if we're blocked doing that, that will be bottling our emotions up in some way, shape or form. Um, or and then the other side of that is connection. They're reciprocal and happening at the same time, but we can also look at what we are connecting to, whether it's like we've had before in other calls about who are we surrounding ourselves with, what opinions are we being subjected to, or at the end of the day, what are we allowing in uh consciously with opinions, and what are we learning, what are we choosing to learn, what are we choosing to um connect with in terms of sunlight, or what's coming into our body from the outside world. So that can be, so, ideas, it could be nature, it could be the air quality or the way we're breathing. It all blends back into that. So again, moving, eating, breathing, sleeping, thinking, feeling, expressing, connecting.
Wow. And the connecting, that's a good one to end on. We actually had the opportunity to do some grounding the other day. So for anybody who is a regular follower of the Self-Help Bookshelf and joining us on Facebook on our group, we actually managed to get together the other day talking about connecting. Myself, Emma, and Rory were all in the same place at the same time for the first time. And we were in Norwich Forum at a Mind, Body, Spirit fair. So it was amazing that this week's followed on with the topic healing anyway, because that was all a last minute thing. But then Sunday, Rory and I had a chance to go to the beach before we headed back to Brighton, a very long drive. So thank you for coming all of that way. That was amazing. But we managed to go to the beach. I did get a paper cut off one of the flints because I fell over. I'm not doing my exercises right if I don't fall over. But we managed to do some grounding. And so when you're saying about stuff coming in, it was the energy going out as well. And oh my goodness, that's the most relaxed I have felt in a long time after standing on the beach, getting my feet in the water, no matter how cold it was and how rough the stones were. But we just managed to ground and do exercises on the beach, and it felt amazing. And sometimes even something like that, it helps so much with pain relief. And I've got to say, from a point of help for all of what Rory's talking about, I have learned a great deal from him this last year. When I said about the health problems I'd gone through, adding back problems, I'd put my knee out last year. And when I first spoke with Rory online last year, not only was I still learning to recommunicate, but I was on a walking frame. I could barely move. I could barely get down the stairs from my flat. Now, I have followed Rory's advice avidly this last year. And I think Sunday we must have walked, must have been close on 2 miles by the time we got down to the beach and back, and did 20 minutes of exercise while we were down there. Without a walking stick even. I didn't even take my stick that day. So that's the difference. And okay, Saturday I was in a bit more pain moving boxes and books, and I've still got to unpack all my books. That was a bit more painful for me. But Sunday I just managed to go, and just everything fell into place. But the grounding was amazing. So healing is also been with me with the neurodiversity and getting over, like you said, all that stuckness and scatter, and getting the sleep hygiene in there and the nutrition, and certainly, there's been so many aspects of it I've worked on myself the last year. And I know Rory definitely works on all of this on himself every day. And I highly recommend, if anybody is struggling with, sleep, with health, with pain, with nutrition, with feeling overwhelmed and stuck and all of that, then yeah, absolutely give him a call, get on a call with him, because he literally can talk about this for a year. He's been talking to me about it all year and I still haven't heard everything. Awesome, Rory, awesome.
Yay. I just want to say thanks for sharing that. I think it's really the it's really, really inspiring to see that happen for you.
Okay.
And and it just goes to show, there's a couple of things there when connecting to the earth. There's arguments to say that the electrons travel through the body, and those electrons then can help with gliding of our tissues more easily, and how the electrons are electricity. So our muscles and our nerves both fire using electrons, and we get those electrons from food, but also touching the earth as and the ground, and it grounds us, like you said about the grounding, is a physical grounding, because grounding can often be talked about as a sort of, again, like a calming down feeling, or an feeling grounded in the mind, but also in it physically in the body. Again, it comes back down to that there's a structural thing that happens at almost at the same time, or can be at the same time as what's happening mentally. Um, so, the last piece I say is that feeling, that cold that we felt, that would have created a nervous system to automatically tighten up and draw blood away from the skin. So in that sense of the on the micro lymphatic drainage, automatic contraction of it, even if it feels uncomfortable, it has a physical shift and movement on getting the blood flow going from the skin and the outer parts of the fascia and the muscles. So all of that is really useful to have a little bit of cold, and the touching of the salts as well. There's the salts that going through the skin. I could go on a big in for ages, but just that one activity had about at least four different added effects that will stack those um things happening all at once.
There's all the background knowledge. I enjoy the process of doing it. It feels good, but Rory has all the background knowledge. That's amazing. So, but yeah, it's so much to it. And there was something else I was going to say then. It's gone again. But I know, yeah, I know I used to do a lot of grounding in my old house. I used to just go down the garden when I'd got a cup of coffee and take my shoes off and put my feet on the grass. So it can be that simple. You don't even have to go all the way to the beach for it. Another time might be walking by the river. If I can find a space where I can bend down, is even just putting my hands in the water, just literally waving my hands in the river. But it's hard for me to get close enough to the river here without falling down the bank. I don't want to fall in. But yeah, it's where I am. I'm 2 floors up and I have no garden or balcony or anything. So from here, even my daughter says when she comes up here, she feels the difference when she's able to actually get back home and put her feet on the ground again or touch something in the garden. But she says she feels the difference up here because there is no grounding in this flat. So certainly for me, it's a massive thing to actually get out and do that. But yeah, I'm sure there's something else I was going to say a minute ago, but it's gone.
That's okay.
That'll come back.
Yeah. Um. uh, yeah. I'll just round off with the idea that there's a system put together. Again, there's the model of pick and choosing what patterns may be missing, but also or overdone, overcooked or undercooked, as it were, uh, and and also this 5BS system, which is there to remind us of what we are, what 5 different areas we can focus on, which is blood sugars, and that's talking about all of the nutrition again, not just sugar, but that's a really good focus on and start to manage that, because then the body can learn how to um thrive on less, um because if you think about it as like throwing logs on a fire that's going to burn for a number of hours, one log can burn for an hour, if it depending on the wood, um
Yeah.
or if you throw petrol, which refined sugar is a bit like petrol. You throw petrol on the fire, you get a and then it's gone again, and then all the heat's gone, so you get this burst of energy, and then it goes back again. So in itself, that could be potentially why energy regulation starts to go up and down, and it's tiring. So that thing that you think is important to reach out for, if you're hungry and it's a sugary snack, and you're also complaining about energy, then bear that in mind, that that's basically what is potentially happening with the body. Um, uh, that's just the blood sugars. We've got breathing structure. So we talked about that a little bit before. Blood sugars, breathing structure. Um, can I
Breathing
remember?
is very important for me as an asthmatic.
Mm.
A time I've had a lot of health issues around breathing, but yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Um,
Breathing. I know you've told me before, and now I can't remember them. But
uh, why can't I remember them? Uh, uh,
book. Let me grab your book.
oh, excellent.
Oh, flying back in my chair. Right. Right. Chapter 11. Do you know what page it is?
It is.
It's in here somewhere. I found the right chapter. I'm just going to find the right 5 BSs now. And how is it? We get so, like you say, when you've got a year's worth of information in your head, I'm the same with my stuff. I could easily talk about it for a year. There is so much. And maybe that's what we need to do next week, is look more on the emotional health. And
Oh
then
yeah, I don't list it in the in that book.
oh no, you didn't, did you? Because you ran out of words. That's right. It was in the original one that you sent me, and then you had to remove it.
Yeah. So,
Okay. So
yeah.
blood
Uh,
sugar.
but
BS was one of them, wasn't it?
yeah. So
I remember there being a BS in there.
yeah, there's the bullshit, which is basically toxic exposure. So that can be people ideas, negative ideas, or but also the chemicals that are in foods and or um skin products and things like that that potentially could be affecting and clogging up the immune system. Um, depending on how much is there. Then there's uh belief system.
So
Belief system being what we perceive is bullshit or not, and how we react to it, and all of the patterns of belief systems around what's going on, to look into that too. And then the fifth one, battery supply. Battery supply. So battery supply, like the electrons, the food intake, the vitamin C, the salts, the electrolytes, all the things that help us with converting into a battery, and also the mind battery, how we defragment. I know there's a lot there, but I think it's important to at least give that overview, because it at least is an overview. Normally you just get an someone, and it may work really well for a particular cohort of people, um, and that's great. Looking at the functional nutrition can be exactly what someone needs and looking for in their life, but it can also be other things. So I like to at least do the whole overview, and then it's pick and choose, and then find your expert around it. So that's what I want it to be, is a system of um collaboration amongst practitioners and patients and clients as well.
that's powerful. Yeah. And it's reminded me in that as well, what I was going to say earlier. There is something in there you said, which I think people don't realize how important that is. And that's when you're talking about the electrolytes. And actually having a really good GP who listens and monitors your medication. And the other one is making sure you read the information on your medication and go back. And I know, Rory, you've got a story of a patient around this as well. But it was back in the days when I was in St. John's. So it was about 20 odd years ago, about 20 years ago. It doesn't seem that long ago now, but it must have been. I had my husband then, he took a phone call one night, and all I remember is him saying, yeah, she'll do that. She'll be at the door. And I was like, what's he let me in for? And he hung the phone up and said, right, grab your defib, because I used to carry a defib. I was trained in those days. And he said, right, grab your defib, be outside. He said, your friend Michael's on the way to hospital. He thinks he's having a stroke. So my friend's landlord was driving him, or he was his friend. So my friend's friend, but was also his landlord he was staying with. They stopped and picked me up on the way through, and he looked so ill that I jumped in the back of the car with him. And we hadn't got more than about probably about 8 miles at the most, and he passed out in the car. And by the time we could pull the car over, I was already on the phone to the ambulance. And while I'm on the phone to them, he actually stopped breathing as well. Now, this is a man that was about 18 stone. I couldn't move him, so we had to wave some other traffic down until somebody fit enough suddenly appeared and helped me get him out of the car, and I had to resuscitate him on the roadside. He stopped breathing 3 more times in hospital that night. And when they tested him, it turned out was electrolytes had been completely stripped from his blood. It wasn't a stroke at all. And this is a man who was barely 30 years old at the time. And electrolytes had been stripped from his blood, which basically meant his blood stopped circulating properly. And his heart was struggling. And once I got him breathing again, which is a couple of quick resus breaths, and luckily I had all my mask and everything with the defib. But he then went into fits and was literally clawing at his chest. And I ended up sitting in the ambulance with the paramedic. And between us, we were holding the straps to hold him into the bed because he was just fitting and arching up all the time. And that was more dramatic than him stopping breathing. When he stopped breathing, I knew what to do. I was trained for that. But when he was fitting so much all the way to the hospital, there was nothing we could do except just keep him strapped to the bed. But anyway, they dealt with him. He recovered and eventually came out of hospital about a week later. But it turned out that his GP had put him on some antidepressants that were very powerful because of things he'd been through. And they'd left him on these antidepressants for 18 months when the maximum should have been 3 months. And that's what had done the damage. And so then in a panic, the GP put him from these suppressants onto some stimulants. And a month later, he tried to commit suicide, and I had to save him again because they flipped his brain completely the other way into a high buzz that he couldn't cope with. So it was a very traumatic time for all of us. But because of what he'd been through and why he was on them in the first place, by the second time, when he actually tried to take his life the second time and I saved him again, this time he wasn't grateful and he never spoke to me again. So I lost a really, really good friend because of his mental health. But despite that, that's not the situation. The situation is watch what's on your medication. If you're on things like antidepressants, they are important. I've since then had antidepressants. I had to try 3 different types for them to work for me. But I had to keep working with my GP to find some that I could actually recover on rather than making me more ill. And I had to get my GP to listen. But make sure you read them. Make sure you follow the instruction leaflets. Make sure you keep going back for your appointments and don't miss them. And don't just assume that antidepressants are going to get you out of your depression, because all they do is numb the feelings while you work on whatever the trauma is in the background, whatever your mental health is that's going on. The antidepressants are there to help you cope while you deal with the mental health issues. They don't cure them for you. So a bit of a tangent from what we're saying about the physical health, but it can have a massive impact on physical health when it's literally nearly making you die because the medication's been mismanaged. So from a point, it's really sensible from our point of view to say, do monitor whatever you're taking for any health condition, to be honest. And again, coming back to that intuition as well, that is a really important thing as well, to listen to what you feel your body's telling you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, quite a lot there, quite heavy, but yeah, it was all good in the end. He's still alive, that's the main one, somewhere, but just doesn't talk to me anymore. So I understood why, and I had to let that go and just accept that I did the right thing at the right time on the right day to save a life. I couldn't do otherwise. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So about looking for the gifts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd love to know what anyone gets from all of this. And any comments, any highlights, any ideas, any questions around any of this, then yeah, it'd be great to hear.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for tuning in. Anybody who's listened through today, we are always grateful for any feedback and comments. Let us know what you think. And I think it would be great if we followed on with the physical, from physical health into something like mental health. So we do, but the mental and emotional health rather. So we can do something more around the emotional health next week and look at it from a completely different aspect of why that is also critical to overall health. So not just the antidepressants and the mental health side, but the actual emotional part. So thank you ever so much for watching in today to High Leverage Actions and finding yourself, your higher self through healing. And thank you once again, Rory. And we will see you all next week.
Nice one. Thank you.
Bye bye.